Hi, I'm international publicist Michelle Tennant Nicholson, and I am a precinct leader, the vice chair in East Flat Rock, North Carolina for the Democratic Party in Henderson County, the Hendersonville, if you know where we are in Western North Carolina. And I need training on how to win at what I'm doing because I'm a complete volunteer who has no experience in politics other than leading an Amnesty International chapter in Chicago. That's about it. So I've asked my good friend Kathleen Gould to be with us to really give us the lowdown on how to be effective precinct leaders, chairs and vice chairs. And we've already talked about how many people it takes to organize a precinct, identifying like-minded people in your precinct, and getting lists together from the Board of Elections or your local party to really reach out. And by the way, you could be a Democrat or not and still get value from these videos. So I invite you to eavesdrop, even if you feel like you shouldn't be eavesdropping on what the Democrats are up to. So with me is Kathleen Gould, and this time we're going to be talking about what do we actually do. So Kathleen, tell us first a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of, oh my God, I've got a list, now what?
Well, I used to be a teach in the English department at the college level, retired to Western North Carolina at Henderson County for the climate, and found myself getting involved with the local Democratic Party. In just 2 or 3 years' time, I found myself the first vice chair of the county in charge of helping to organize and develop precincts. And it requires, I mean, I'm pretty a gregarious person, very extroverted, and so I enjoy talking to people. And I've had a lot of experience canvassing. I've had some experience making phone calls, and I just recognize that these things have to be done. So how do we use our...
Okay, well, hold on
Okay.
just a second.
Okay.
Is there somebody watching who's like, what is canvassing? Is that like an art?
Oh, okay. Okay.
So let's just get into like really the basics, because when I first heard that, I was like, what is that? What is canvassing?
Okay. Well, what canvassing is knocking on people's doors and asking them to vote. And generally speaking, we knock on doors of people that we believe are friendly to our position. But there are also a lot of unaffiliated voters that we hope to reach as well as Democrats. And so often people aren't home, but you leave information. I always say you don't go out knocking doors without something to hand to the person at the door about the candidates or about your party or about why you're knocking on the door. It's useful to go out with candidates when they're available, but the goal is to get people to think about going to vote. And there are timetables for some of this that where it's the most effective, that if you start knocking on doors too soon, people forget. It's also a manpower issue. There are a lot of doors to cover and you don't have enough volunteers to hit them all more than once. You have to sort of think about how you're going to sort out what doors you're going to knock and when you're going to knock them. And so there are better times than others depending on your area. In my area, for the most part, Saturday mornings and afternoons are good. Sunday afternoons are good. Weeknights, not so much. I don't want people knocking on my door at 5:30 in the evening when I'm either having a drink or starting to fix supper. If I had kids at home, there's a lot going on. You know, I don't want people knocking on my door on a weeknight. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So getting people who are free to knock doors or canvass, as we call it, at the times that most workable or most effective, that's another problem. So
well, let me interject and ask a question about some of that, what you've just said. So I'm in a pretty rural
right.
You know, and there's a lot of different types of people. We have, and so I'm thinking about that, like, okay, and here's what's happened. Let's talk about the timing. Mm-hmm. So we've got midterm elections coming up in the fall of 2018. I started to be a precinct officer in 2017. In 2018, I started to reach out and talk to my precinct, and we've had some meetings. And I actually have about, I'd say, 5 people who've said that they are willing. That's my dog. So don't think that I have a paranormal ghost. My dog just, like, my husky just bust in the door. And there's my husband. Hi, it's okay. How's it going, babe?
There you go.
So this is like live TV, everybody. So I'm just wondering, because they've said, I want to canvas, I don't want to make phone calls. And I'm like, I love to make phone calls, but I don't want to canvas, right? It just reminds me of my Girl Scout cookie days or something like that. So how do I interact with the officers of the local party to make sure that I have the right materials or know what to say? And when should I actually take those 5 people and hit the road? Should it be like the month before, or what's good?
Well, one of the things that happen is if your county party, wherever you are, if the county party is on the ball, if they're doing what they should be doing, they will have materials for you. It's generally the candidate's responsibility.
Okay, let me stop you.
Okay.
I know you're getting real passionate.
Okay.
Every time you hit your fist.
Oh, okay.
Really? It sounds like a judge gavel, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll quit doing that. Every time.
We can hear you.
So do we have to? Are we starting all over with this?
No, we're going.
Okay. I won't pound
People
the.
are going to think this is hilarious.
No, one of the things you have to, the local party needs to be doing its job. It is candidates' responsibility to provide the local party with materials to hand out. But it's also the party's job to, one of the things we do in our county is certainly by the time we start to knock doors, to canvass in earnest, we have at the very least, a list of all the candidates.
Okay.
That people are going to vote for.
So then we can't really canvass until after primaries anyway.
Correct.
So before primaries, it's great to build those relationships and have your, like, who's actually going to be volunteering this year. Then after primaries, when we know who the candidates are, then get the messaging and what's important to the candidates to then deliver to the precinct, like who's actually going to be endorsed by your party.
Right.
And then deliver that. And I like to just honestly, because I don't really, I like to just listen to people and find out what's important to them. Do you find that listening is better than speaking oftentimes?
Oh, when you're at the door, absolutely. It depends on when you do it. The big get out the vote, and it's not just in Hendersonville or Henderson County. I'm sure they use these same letters all over the place. People will see GOTV in capital letters. Well, it does not stand for Go TV.
That's what I thought it meant. I was like, what does that mean?
It stands for Get Out the Vote. And so if the county party's doing its job, it's got people working on that. And different states have different ways of doing it as well. And so I'm not sure, there are just different customs. In some states don't have primaries, they have something else, or they have primaries on different days. But anyway, when you're actually in the final push, let me back up and say, the goal in Henderson County is to reach as many doors as possible before the beginning of early voting. And early voting in our state starts roughly 3 weeks before Election Day.
Oh, that's good. That's a good timeline. Okay.
So
maybe the first year relationship, then 6 months out, we've got meetings, and then 3 weeks out, 6 weeks out, we start to really get for those canvassing and those messages from the candidates.
Yes. 6 weeks out before early voting starts.
That's a good timeline.
So,
okay.
it depends on in an individual county, depends on the population of the county and the population of the precinct and how many doors you have that you want to hit. And again, in most places, there's never enough manpower to hit every door. So you have to be selective. And there are ways to do that. That system I mentioned before, Vote Builder, provides ways to create different kinds of lists. So one of the things, for example, in Henderson County that we're really concentrating on this year in midterm elections is to really concentrate on generating lists of voters who tend not to vote in midterm elections. They vote in regular presidential years, but in midterms, statistically nationwide, the voter turnout is hideously low. And so getting those voters out to vote for, I mean, really important races at the state level in North Carolina, and congressional races, national U.S. Congress congressional races are up every 2 years. So it's important that people that don't vote in midterms really vote this year for us. I mean, it really is important. And so I'm hitting the desk again.
You are hitting the desk again. Well, so we're going to wrap up this video, but before we wrap it up, I do want to know, like, so once we have these lists, we've got the messages from the candidates, we've got our timeline down, we've got our volunteers put together. Is it more important to do the canvassing one-on-one with our candidates and with our volunteers, or is it more important to do meet and greets like at parks and different places? Or what have you found personally, or maybe both? What's the most important thing precinct leaders should be doing during that push?
Obviously, the candidates, it depends on their district. Our U.S. congressional candidate has to cover 16 counties. Ours does. In another state, it might be different. Our state House and Senate candidates have a much narrower area that they have to cover. It's not realistic for anybody to think they can always go, that the candidate can canvass with a member of a precinct in every precinct. It's just not going to happen because they are stretched thin on where they go. So for the candidates, it's probably more effective meet and greets and town halls and mass gatherings where the voters can hear them speak. It's important for the precinct people who are knocking doors to have 2 or 3 key ideas of those candidates ready for people who ask them. In my own experience, however, in knocking doors, has been that if people are home, they're glad to get the information that I have. They talk about if they're really, really, really committed Democrats, that's great. There's just a lot of hooray for our side, exchanges. People that are unaffiliated, but might vote one way or the other in the general election, tend to be the ones who ask more questions about what's going on, or what does your candidate think? But you can certainly ask them what are your concerns, and then when they say they're concerned, then you counter back with, here, our candidate A addresses that concern thusly.
And then what if we just simply don't know the answer to the question? What's the best way? Just get it back to the candidate's website, or take the question and get back to them? What would you recommend?
I think this year we're recommending that we're going to have information about the candidate's website, but I would say you have to kind of play it by ear. You have to be pretty good. You have to sort of think on your feet in a way. But I have many times I've said, I don't know exactly the answer to that question, but I'm going to make a note here on my sheet where your name is. I'm going to say, get back to this person with this information. Well, so again, a lot depends on what is happening at the door.
That's perfect. And I'm just remembering some of the things that we did in our precinct, and I just did naturally just because of my work. My career in this world, I was like, well, if we're going to have a local candidate come to our meeting, I told this to my my chair of our precinct. I said, if we're going to have that candidate come out before the
election,
then let's make their time worthwhile by recording them, and because they usually do like a little bit of a speech, right? And then sharing that with the rest of the precinct. And that went over really well, because then I took a little video of them, and then I sent it out to our precinct Democrats, and then I also sent the video to the candidate, and then they shared it on social media. And I think that's a smart way to use social media. But I don't know how much, if it's even imperative to have a social media presence for my own precinct different than my county's precinct. I'd rather just latch on to theirs.
Right.
What's your opinion?
I know of one precinct that has created a Facebook page, and I think another precinct has or is in the process. And the first one that did it mainly as a way of just communicating with people in the precinct who perhaps did not have an email. I mean, I'm not sure what she did, because I don't know how to create a Facebook page. So she sort of experimented with how open or closed a page that she wanted and that sort of thing. And she may decide that it wasn't worth it. She hasn't had it long enough to make a decision yet. But because our Henderson County Democratic Party has a Facebook page and has a website, and the website has been redesigned in a way that's supposed to be much more user-friendly and convenient and everything, I think we get pretty good coverage in that regard. And so as a way to communicate within your precinct, I don't see a problem with it, but I've never felt the need to have it myself. When I was a precinct chair, it was not something that even occurred to me to ask somebody to help me do. I used my lists that were developed and just would constantly be checking to see, but I finally, I got a core group of people that have stuck with it. And even though I'm no longer the precinct chair and someone else is, the same group of people has stuck with it. And we acquired a few more that remain active. I think it's just something that the individual precincts have to decide what they can do and what they want to do. I'd like to see them spend more time just contacting people, more and more people. And somebody has to already be on Facebook to make use of the Facebook page. They're pounding again.
Well, and when I just asked the people that I was calling and that I was speaking to, how would they like to be communicated to? And some of the younger people said, I'd prefer a text only, please. They didn't even want an email. And other people said an email. And then some of our older citizens said, I'd really like a phone call when there's really an important meeting or something to attend. So, and whether you're going to do that as a precinct leader, the personal phone calls and that kind of stuff, that's really up to you, because that's your time. I think that it's what the bottom line is from my own view is, getting out international messages, is that it's important to consider the target audience. So if you're trying to reach an audience that's an older age set, then communicate in a way that they're used to being communicated to, and it might be mail, right? It might be something that looks like a traditional newsletter. It might be the church bulletin or something like that.
If I can interject here too, a lot of the things that I send out to precinct officers and then want them to send out to at least their active core group, their precinct committee, and to others, a lot of those things, unless there may be something I don't know, but a lot of that stuff can't be texted. It can be sent an email attachment, but it's not easily, sent by it's just not easily sent by text or even messaging. It can be,
well, and that's why people are more and more doing Facebook, because then you can do a link. But I think that also, like if you're doing
you can text a link, but let's just say if I sent out, if somebody in the party created some instructions for how to do something on Vote Builder, which Eric Perilous recently did, I have that, in a document form that I downloaded from an email, but there's no link to send it out in a text to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but here's something that's really slick, you know, because I marched in DC, you know, at the famous march and whatnot. So I signed up for all the communications then, and I get communications from national organizations that not only have a link in my text, but then it actually takes me into a way to take action today. So it'll lead me through conversations through elected officials. It just sets it all up for me. So I think the wave of the future,
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
And what I'd like to do, and as we wrap up, is to really look to promise everybody, you know, in my quest to be a good precinct officer, I have already interviewed people from other states. Right, so I learned, like in Indiana, how they turned a traditionally red area into a blue area, and I have all that information in my head. I wish that at that time I would have thought to just put it on a YouTube video to share with everybody. And so I think that moving forward in my own quest to be a precinct leader, to share these types of videos with other people who have experience like you do, Kathleen, and maybe from other states on what's been successful and what's not successful, because some people may say, you know what, all that social media presence was a waste of time. What really made the difference was those phone calls or the canvassing and so forth. Before we leave, I want you to address one thing we should never do, though. I know that you have that one thing we should never do, and what is one thing that precinct leaders should never do?
Well, the sort of facile answer is to say to never give up. But, you know, I haven't really run into anything that I would say don't ever do, because if you think something might work, I mean, I've told my people, please don't fail to log into Vote Builder on a regular basis so you don't lose your access. And yet, they do from time to time do that very thing, lose their access, and then we have to do it again. I think I will say it is not for the faint-hearted, but people are can be surprisingly courageous when it gets down to the nitty-gritty. But people have asked me, aren't you afraid to knock on doors where you don't know people? And I say, no. I said, but I'm not stupid. I don't knock on at a door that gives me all kinds of clues, might not be safe. But I'm a pretty brave person, I think. I've turned out to be braver than I might have thought at one time. And that's what I would want to say is, don't ever give up. Don't think you can't do it. Just don't think negatively. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk to people.
I think that's the main thing, is just talking to people. And one thing that we have very little of today is civil discourse. And we may never agree with each other, but we can always find common ground. And one of the things that when I feel at a loss with the people in my precinct, at the very least, I can listen to them. And I can have them be heard. And I think that's a lot.
It's a difficult thing because, I mean, it is hard to talk to people that are very difficult. I mean, so I realize I now can tell you the one thing not to do.
Oh, good. Okay.
Don't take it personally. When people are rude to you or call you a snowflake or call you names or call your candidate. This happened to me once, Satan's wife.
Oh my God. Only in the South.
Personally, you just say thank you for your time and you walk away and you just go to the next one. There's always a next one. So don't take it personally.
Thanks so much for being with me today and just giving us your insights. And I have a feeling this is not the last of the 3 series. And if you're very interested in this series, I'm going to put the links in the description and you can subscribe so that when we add new videos, you'll be notified. Have a great day, and thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you, Michelle.